The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Welcome to the podcast on Wednesday, the 26th of May, 2021. On the podcast today, John Meyer, mining analyst and partner at SP Angel, talks about China, their influence, the fact they're deliberately slowing down. Also mentions Kodal Minerals, Ironridge Resources, Rainbow Rare Earths, and BlueJay Mining. Plus, at the end of the podcast, I have two lists for you. As always, the top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours, and the top 5 most read RNSs too. By the way, you can see both these lists at voxmarkets.co.uk, where you'll see lots of other content. In fact, there's an article there, Traders Cafe with Zach Meyer, Extract Resources. Talks to Colin Bird, Executive Chairman. Also, there's Polarian Imaging notes Oxford research on hyperpolarized xenon MRI scans, and further research on that discovers that long COVID, apparently, the issues of long COVID is picked up by their technology, but not by MRI or CT scans, which is quite amazing. There's also an article there, or in fact a video there, with Francesca and George Franceschidis from Alba Mineral Resources there, talking about their Greenland assets. And don't forget our COVID-19 index. It is at the top of the page there. Check it out. Biggest rise today is Synergen, up 14.14% to 142. Biggest faller is Novocyte, down 3.3% to 351. Check that out at voxmarkets.co.uk.
Vox Markets is an online community of investors that runs a free mobile and desktop platform that allows you to track news and updates about any UK-listed company, offering RNS push notifications, detailed charts, pricing data, and much more. Find out more at voxmarkets.co.uk/app.
And joining me on the podcast right now is John Meyer, mining analyst and partner at SP Angel. You all right, John?
Yes, good, thank you.
Do you know, I was surprised that day. I was reading, I do my, 5 things you need to know before the markets open podcast, and it's like about 60 seconds long. It's 5 sort of headlines. One of the headlines there was China has overtaken Germany to become the UK's biggest single import market for the first time since records began. Goods imported from China rose 66% from the start of 2018 to £16.9 billion in the first quarter of this year, and imports from Germany fell to £12.5 billion. So that's unbelievable. They're over the other side of the world. That just shows how much power they have. They're cheap imports, but Germany's on our doorstep, and yet obviously higher value cars like Audis, Mercs, Porsches, whatever, Volkswagens, and yet China now has overtaken them in imports. That's how much power they have, isn't it? Really,
Well, until recently, it was pretty cheap to ship products and goods around the world in containers or otherwise. Those transport costs have gone up a lot recently, but that's partly a reflection of the increased trade that's going on between East and West. Now, add into that mix the problems with getting stuff across the border into the Eurozone. Where customs officials have been absolute buggers on the European side. I don't know what they're behaving like on our side, but the stories are that they haven't behaved well on their side, and they're typical Eurozone belligerents. But things are sorting themselves out, and the sky has not collapsed in on our heads, so we continue.
Yeah, I'm just worried about that. Just so much reliance on China. I mean, this is since records began in 1997, and Germany's been our UK's biggest source of imports, and now, except for a 6-month period at the end of 2000, and now it's China. I just think that just shows how powerful they're becoming, and that documentary I watched just. It's a bit worrying. They don't show us, basically what they're doing. We don't have any transparency with them at all, and I think carefully, and I said it's the quiet revolution there. They're quietly taking over the world.
Well, look, I think the Germans will be back. They've been trying to incorporate us into their marketing strategy for many, many years, one way or another. So I think it's a big world. I mean, I'm a globalist myself, and I feel that we should trade with whoever we like around the world, and hopefully with fewer tariffs and import-export impediments as possible.
Yeah, but what do you think on the debate about it's better being inside the tent rather than outside? Because there's a lot of ethical questions, human rights and all that abuses in China. It goes on, and there's a lot of condemnation of it, but yet we just deal freely with them, and we don't say no. I mean, if everyone started, saying we're not going to start dealing with you freely now, trading with you, unless you start sorting that out, then it would impact them massively, But we've got to act as one block. I mean, should we say to them, we're not going to be a trading partner of yours if you're treating, minorities this badly, going to correction camps or re-education camps, as they call them.
I certainly don't agree with the camps, but I think the more we trade with China, I think the more influence we might be able to gain in adjusting the way they behave towards their minorities. So I think this is a case where we've probably got to work with them to some degree in order to have more influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you mentioned there before we came on that China's slowing down in some area. Which area is this?
Well, they're deliberately slowing some of the stimulus that they've been putting in. And what we see from certain statistics, the Chinese are pretty clever about the way they collect statistics within their economy. And they have some 600,000 units of construction machinery around China, which are all connected to through Wi-Fi or whatever it is. And they can see what equipment's working at what time. So what we can see from the excavator index, that the amount of material being excavated is falling. But then we can see that other machinery, concrete machinery and lifting equipment, has seen, concrete machinery is slowing down, lifting equipment is rising. So what we see is as these construction projects mature, then you don't need so much excavation, you don't need so much concrete pouring, but what you do need is lifting machinery for getting products into new offices, into new apartment blocks and stuff like that. So the stimulus programs that they put in place a year ago, and they were very, very quick about re-stimulating the economy and getting things going again. That's done their job, and now those projects are coming towards the end of those project cycles. The next part of that project will be selling on the apartments, getting the new office blocks filled and up and running, all those sorts of things. So the products that they'll be consuming will change. So more stainless steel, requiring more nickel. Those are the sorts of things we're looking at, rather than the concrete and the maybe the rebar steel going forward. So it's interesting to see how China's economy is evolving, and China's they're not slowing down particularly, but it's just changing in the way that they are consuming bulk products.
Okay, all right. Right, let's look at some individual company news. I know I saw a couple of people were, shaken, not stirred, maybe, by Kodal Minerals, KOD, of course. Something happened with the government there, and the share price was dropped by 30% or something, didn't it? So what happened there, John?
Yeah, it was a pretty severe move in the share price, and I think that was really very much overdone. Yes, the military decided to take over the government again for the second time, I think, in a year. And the reason for that, I believe, is the acting prime minister they weren't choosing the right guy to be the prime minister going forward. So the military intervened. They clearly have a bit of an agenda and a way of doing things out there. And the military is very important because you've got terrorist groups operating in the north of Mali, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and various other Islamic factions. So the military is not necessarily a bad thing in this country, but they're trying to steer it in a way that presumably puts the people in charge who they feel comfortable with. Look, I think what's important, particularly within West Africa, is governments come and go, coups are a fairly regular thing, but mining companies generally carry on. The problem with these sorts of situations is that mining license approval and that sort of stuff tends to get delayed when there's any change in government, because there'll be a new minister who will have to sign off on things. But Kodal are very well developed. And I really don't see this being too much of an impediment. The Chinese company Sino-Hydro, looking at the Kodal project in detail, no doubt will want to get comfortable with whoever the new prime minister is. But I see this as perhaps offering a delay rather than anything more serious than that.
Yeah, but you know what? It depends on your, what's the word? Your constitution, as far as risk is concerned, and your ability to sit on risk. Because this is why I genuinely avoid resource companies in Africa and stuff like that, and non-revenue generating. It's a risk. It's an extra risk. You don't need sometimes, and I can see why people want exposure to lithium or gold and all that stuff. But if you want that, you have to put up with this kind of risk, because it can happen. And like you say, this happens on a regular basis, pretty much. There's the military taking over, but there's always that risk that suddenly they could just grab the asset, because it's happened before in African countries, so it's not unknown for it to happen. So, but it depends on your appetite for risk, doesn't it? If you're happy with that and you diversify well enough, but you want exposure to sort of precious metals or essential metals, then that's that, isn't it? It's up to you. I just think there's enough risk in equities alone without having to take on more risk.
Well, we look at lots of projects in lots of countries in Africa, and I find the African governments and politicians are generally extremely pragmatic. And now that most of them, hopefully nearly all of them, have got the idea that Western companies don't pay bribes anymore, things have settled down a bit. I think there's less of the pink palm tax going on than there used to be. The Chinese haven't adopted Western methodology in that, but at least bribery is not tax deductible in France anymore. But at the end of the day, I'm sure the project will get to go ahead. It's just a question of, will it be the Chinese guys who are looking at it, or will it be Kodal having to try and move it ahead, or will it be somebody else who's consolidating in the lithium space? Because what I am sure of is that the world is going to need a lot more lithium for the lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, and there aren't enough projects to go around at the moment.
Yeah. It's just frustrating if you're a shareholder, you buy in there and just drops. The last 3 days now it's gone down. It was at almost 0.3 and now it's at 0.2. So it's a big chunk, isn't it? So again, it's your appetite for risk and the volatility therein, and to me, I don't like that kind of drops, those kind of ups and downs. But I mean, if you want that, you can go for it. But I suppose you are more acclimatised, John, because you've been out in these places and you sort of know about this. You have more experience there. And I suppose if you haven't, if you're just a private investor who's never been to a country, never met with management in these countries and don't know how it works, it can be a bit scary, can't you? Think, wow, and it can scare investors off.
Well, Mali is an absolute dream of a country from a mining perspective, because they welcome the mining. The local villagers welcome the mining as well. They're all used to it. There's lots of skills in country. It's a country that makes it work, and the government is hugely supportive. They take a 10% stake in any project that's coming into development, and so that everybody wins. As far as I can see, I mean, if you think back to the days of Rand Gold Resources, that company was built on the Marilla project in Mali. And then they developed an even larger project in the DRC, and then they merged with Barrick Gold. So the potential is there, and there was, I'm sure there were one or two coups in Mali over the years whilst Rand Gold were operating out there, but didn't stop it from developing its business.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, that's Kodal. So you reckon it's going to be volatile? That's just going to happen, but it'll bounce back, you think?
I think that share price fall is overdone.
Okay. All right. Okay. Ironridge Resources, IRR ticker. What's the news there, John?
They're extending the resource. They've got additional high-grade intersections at the lithium project in Ghana. They have a defined JORC compliant resource of 14.5 million tonnes at 1.31% lithium oxide, and that that project is developing nicely. The benefit that these guys have is they're on the coast of Ghana. It's still got to truck it about 50 k's to a port, so there's all the loading and unloading costs and all that sort of stuff. But there is a benefit to being closer to the port area, and I see this developing quite nicely again as another useful lithium project. And we've got the Chinese Ganfeng are looking at buying Bacanora minerals at the moment. Ironridge may well be next.
Yeah. I mean, what's the sort of longer picture there for lithium? I mean, where are we at the moment, supply and demand wise? I assume obviously demand will obviously go up, but how can supply? How able is supply to cope with that?
Well, lithium carbonate prices, which is one of the prices we look at in the lithium industry, have more than doubled over the last 6-8 months. And spodumene prices, which is the raw material, they've recovered from about $400 a ton up to $640 today. So spodumene prices looking good. It's spodumene, which is the material that Ironridge and Kodal Minerals will export. And all that gets processed in China at the moment. Hopefully somebody will develop a spodumene processing facility either in West Africa or in Europe, because we could do with a bit more competition, shall we say. I think if there's a bit more competition, spodumene prices should carry on rising. Yeah.
Marvellous. Okay, and lastly, John, rainbow rare earth, sort of the same kind of area, I suppose, so demand is going to affect that as well. Do you know what, last time I spoke to rainbow rare earth, I think there was a previous management in there, so change a bit. So what's happening here now?
Well, Rainbow have been managing the Gakara mine in Burundi. It's a very, very high-grade mine. In fact, it's the highest-grade natural rare earth mine on the planet.
Wow, that's a hell of a claim to fame, isn't it?
That is. But they've had a few struggles with it. At the moment, they're having to deal with the government of Burundi and a new minister who's trying to understand it all. But George Bennett, who's running the company now and is a good mining man. He's developing the mining process to use a more modern process. So rather than lots of people with small diggers and wheelbarrows, they're using bigger machinery. Mm-hmm. That makes the economics work better. The side effect is it employs slightly less people in Burundi, but George Bennett is looking to to turn this into a much bigger mine going forwards. Having said that, I think the real value in rainbow rare earths at the moment is the Palabora project that they took on in South Africa last year. That project is a tailings retreatment project, so they'll be retreating phosphogypsum, which was produced from the production of phosphates. That the rare earths within those tailings are in chemical form, and we think, and in fact they've proven that they can recover about 70% of the rare earths in those tailings for just using sulfuric acid. You could use hydrochloric acid, but they'll go for sulfuric acid because the machinery will all be much cheaper, and they get very good recoveries there. So that's a good step forwards in confirming what we think will be very good value in the Palabora project. We think Palabora, in fact, will be the key driver for value for Rainbow going forwards.
Marvellous stuff. Cool. Anything else worth chatting about, Johnny? Anything else out there that's come on your radar this week worth mentioning?
Difficult to know right now. I think there's much to be had. Keeping an eye on BlueJay. Their results earlier this week were quite interesting, highlighting some of the stuff that's going on at the Dundas ilmenite project up in Greenland. That's all making good progress. And I've been talking to them about the pricing of the material that they plan to sell. They should get premium pricing. And the closest price that I can find at the moment, which is in China for their quality of material, appears to be about 30% higher than the standard price quoted on fast markets. So I think there's quite a lot of upside in BlueJay myself. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to being able to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah. And you normally do these conferences, John, these mining conferences. Are they getting back to normal there? Is there any sign they're getting back to normal?
Well, we're doing lots of Zoom interviews with companies at the one-to-one conference this week. Very, very interesting companies. I just had a meeting with Antipa Minerals in Australia. If you look at that on the ASX, really interesting exploration. They've got a license package close to right between two major discoveries in recent years, and I think they're onto something there. And I saw another good company yesterday, Mako Mining in Nicaragua. This is very close to some other guys that we know in Nicaragua, with Mark Childs. If you'll remind me what that one's called. So I think so we're talking to him about Nicaragua. It seems that the government is supportive. The government came out of the Sandinistas, who were considered to be terrorists in their day, but in fact these guys have grown up. I mean, this is the main problem with terrorism is getting old, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the high risk again. Yes, basically the government is now terrorist. Yeah, so that's it though. Resource stocks, sometimes you use the risks. Yeah,
so this gives me more confidence in Condor Resources, where Mark Childs is working, and he's developing the new mine there. And Mako Mining, which has the San Albino mine, seems to be mining very high grade in Nicaragua, and doing very well with it. So I'm impressed.
Yeah. Well, there's a classic thing with terrorists as they grow up. True. Marvellous stuff. John, thanks for that, fella, and we'll speak you next weeky.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, it's time for the top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours. They are at 5. Hummingbird Resources, up 1.2 to 20.75. At 4, Valerium Blockchain, down 1.64% at 30 pence. At 3, Clontarf Energy, down 2.35% to 0.415. At 2, Quantum Blockchain Technologies, up 13% to 1.95. And at 1, Challenger Energy Group, that's CEG, of course, that used to be Bahamas Petroleum, and that is a non-mover of 0.305. Okay, it's time for the top 5 most followed companies, most read RNSs, most viewed, most read RNSs. They are at 5, Rambler Metals and Mining. Rambler updates mineral resources for mining, or Ming Mine. At 4, Novocyte launch of VersaLab Portable. At 3, Tizion Life Sciences, significant immunodemodulation effects on biomarkets. I don't want to say that correctly. At 2, Eurasia Mining, completion of $20 million financing for Rosargeo. And at 1, Supply at Recapital, acquisition update. That's it for the podcast. Thanks for listening. Muchos apreciados.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.